Similar moments and times and peoples and experience and artifacts and keepsakes that remind you of moments and times where God made himself tangible, where he directed you and you knew and you knew and you knew that he had his hands on things. So Hebrews is speaking to that, but also making a point that you can't live back there. I can't live in that aisle. It's okay to have spiritual knickknacks and stories and reminders and artifacts, but we're also reminded that their job was to get us to where we are right now. Our job is not to somehow revisit that past. Because the point for us, for Christians, is how can I get back to that? The point is, Jesus, what are you doing right now? What are you up to? Where are you leading? What are you calling me to do? Like, I'm in. Show me. So Hebrews is very clear on that, because it's not pining for the days of manna. It's not saying, oh, I really wish we were back in the desert so God could give us manna again. It's not saying, oh, I really wish we were back to that time where we escaped Egypt and Moses got the 10 Commandments. Wouldn't it be great to be back there? It's not saying, oh, I really wish that Aaron would come back from the dead with his magic rod and lead us once again. No, Hebrews is saying that would miss the point entirely. Those items are spiritual markers, yes, but they're not enders. They're not the goal. They can be symbols of God's activity or sightings of God's love and action, sure, but the point is to follow God again today, right now. So Hebrews is trying to say that this whole time, God's master plan has been unfolding in stages, and it's time for you and I to say, okay, God, what's next? So with that, a couple of questions. The text is saying to you and me, do you remember your stories? Do you remember the people, the places, and the things that somehow got you to this spiritual spot where you are today? Because those are easy to forget if you don't remind yourself. And as you're reminding yourself, are you telling those stories to your kids to encourage them? Grandparents, are you telling your grandkids God stories about how God showed up in your life in tangible ways and led you to certain places? These are the kinds of stories that we have to share. These are the kinds of stories that we have to tell, because they're encouraging and they put gas in the tank to help us move forward. And as we move forward, the next question for you and I is this: God, what's next? What are you up to? What are you doing? Where are you calling me to join you in the renewal of all things? Show me. Are you looking for God? Are you watching? Are you listening? That even if you do everything perfectly, you plan your flight and the rental and the hotel and the food, and you buy your tickets early, you get the special wristband, you line up in time, you're second in line, even if you do everything right, even if you could follow all of the rules, which you can't, it still won't be good enough for you to get in with God. So Hebrews says, thank goodness that old way of doing things, it's gone, it's finished. That division between holy and not holy, in and out, that is bleeding away. And then we get this description of the two curtains, right, that separate the holy place from the holy of holies. When you and I hear about those curtains, what should our minds go back to? When Jesus died. What happened to that curtain when Jesus died? It tore in two. How's that for an object lesson? That door that kept people out is now gone. And now everyone has full access, backstage pass to God. And if we read between the lines of that, what that also tells us is God is actually inviting us in. He actually wants us to approach Him. So Hebrews then is adding that under this new covenant, under this new arrangement, there is no longer any distinction between in and out and holy and not holy. Instead, it's saying this to you and me, that every moment, every situation, every place has the potential to be electrified by God's presence and His glory. And that you and I have that access. We have the backstage pass. You don't have to sneak your way in, and you don't have to try to perform your way in. You are in simply because Jesus has willed it. So then the big questions that we have to wrestle to the ground here in this section are these. Are you still playing by the old rules? Are you trying to do everything perfectly? So much so that you can somehow convince God and get in on His good books? Is that the way you're playing your spirituality? Or maybe the question for you here this morning is this: are you taking advantage of the full access you have to God? Meaning, are you talking to God? Are you sharing things? Are you asking about things? Are you watching for God's movements? Are you following His lead? Or maybe the question for you this morning is this: is there still a divide for you between more holy and less holy moments? Are you still separating people that way? Are you still separating situations that way? Or have you moved to a place that says, oh, I see that's broken, or that's a mess, or that's painful. That's exactly where God needs to be. That's where I'm going. Going to bridge that gap. We're going to crash that holiness in on whatever trouble and brokenness and situation that those people find themselves in. Jesus has lent you and me His credibility and His prestige. God sees us as priceless because Jesus is standing right next to us. And so because of that, we have been cleaned up. We have a fresh start and now a new motivation to do for others what has been done for us, to tell others about what has happened to us. And if still that is not getting through to you, if you feel like you've had way too many false starts to be in on what God's doing, Hebrews is saying this to you. Yeah, false starts are done. You can't go back and create new beginnings. But right now, here in this moment, you can actually create a brand new ending, because ethics tells you that what you ought and ought not to do in order to be recognizably and acceptably human. But Christianity tells you about a God who takes unrecognizable and unacceptable human beings and accepts them in Jesus, whether or not they happen to have done what they ought to have done. So trust Him. And when you have done that, you are living the life of grace, no matter what happens to you in the course of that trusting, no matter how many waverings you may have, no matter how many suspicions that you have, no matter how much heaviness and sadness your lapses, vices, indispositions, and bratty whining may cause you, you believe simply that somebody else, by His death and resurrection, has made it all right, and you just say thank you and shut up. So now pull all those pieces together. What does all of this mean? I think it's this. It's that you and me and these guys here, we're all off the hook. You're good to go. Your conscience has been cleared. God holds nothing against you. So why would you hold anything against yourself? Hebrews is stressing here that you have peace with God because you have peace from God. So the challenge is to let go of that guilt. And for those of you who are here this morning who feel worthless, this is a special word from God for you, so listen in tightly. If you feel like garbage, if you feel like your life is amounting to nothing, if you feel like you are the sum of your failures, if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, thus you don't know what value or worth you bring to this world, Hebrews says to you that you are valuable. Why? Because Jesus has lent you His credibility and His prestige. And He wants you to have that burden lifted. He wants you to feel that and to own that today. Because you have been cleaned up and you have been freed up. So then, that means that holiness is less about getting it perfect and more about trusting that God has you no matter what.